Okay, what it do? Hi, my name is Baz. I am 26 years old, living in Johannesburg, South Africa. Now I am a little bit sick, so I will pause every now and then, literally to catch my breath, but that's about it. Um, so to preface this, I was initially gonna do a whole different vibe of a video. I wanted to do like a challenge or something fun. I don't really want to make this a deep thing. However, I also feel like to be interested in something that someone is doing, you have to know who they are. And it just didn't feel authentic to just like jump into something without doing that. So I'm going to introduce myself. So I was born on May 17th, 1998, for those of you who care. I know it's a bit irrelevant, but I was born he. And now I go by she. But interestingly enough, I'm still technically he. And I'll explain how that works. So I am transgender. I'm sure a lot of you have heard that word. It's become a craze at this point. And I'm sure there's a lot of connotations towards your opinions on that. I'm not here to change an opinion. I'm not here to form an opinion for someone. I'm here to talk about my life and my journey. So when I was younger, I always sort of felt different. But I never felt different in the sense that I was sad or nothing was bothering me. I just never felt like I had a place in the world. So, for example, boys had things that they were interested in and I wasn't interested in them. Girls had things that they were interested in. Let me fix that. Boys had things they were interested in and I dipped into that. Like I had slight interests in some things that guys like. Even now I'm still very much in touch with like things that guys like as well, but I never fully connected with it. And girls also had things that they were interested in that, again, like now, I don't fully feel connected with either. However, one thing that was evident to me was that what I was assigned as in terms of society or in terms of where I fell in the world, which is ultimately society, I knew I never felt like a guy. That I knew. Even though there was like this dipping in here and dipping in that side as well, I just never felt truly like a guy. Though I called myself a boy and I used the boys' bathrooms and all of these things, I just always had this hyper awareness that I wasn't a guy. But I also never thought anything of it, right? So for example, I used to play with dolls and that's pretty normal. I don't want you to think that just because you play with dolls as a boy or whatever you play with defines your gender. However, I always felt shame about it, and the shame to a degree was because of how I thought my parents would react, because my aunt would buy them all the time. But at the same time, I also knew that my parents let me be whoever I wanted to be. So I never really stressed out about their opinions too much. I did, though, recognize that there was something internal that I felt when I was playing with dolls that I didn't know how to address or what language to use for it. So there was always that internal conflict, and like I used to sort of wear my aunt's clothes when she wasn't around, or my mom's clothes, or like do all these quote unquote girly things. Again, I'm sick, so my dialogue is not going to be perfect, but I used to do a lot of things that made me just feel as though there was more though I just didn't connect with it any further. Until one day, this is going to be very ironic or unexpected rather, I heard the story about Caitlyn Jenner. Now, Caitlyn Jenner, I'm sure most of you know who Caitlyn Jenner is. She is who used to be Bruce Jenner, who was or is, because I know they still call her dad, the father of the Jenner youngest two, or rather all the Jenners in the Kardashian clan. So Caitlyn Jenner did an interview in 2015 with either Barbara Walters or Diane Sawyer, one of the two. And I remember being so intrigued by her story and hearing everything she was saying and feeling like, wait a second, that's how I feel. Now, for context, at that time in my life, I had only had crushes on straight guys. Now, people have opinions on that. I do want to say you cannot control the people you have feelings for. What you can control is how you act upon them. So I don't condone, things like what certain YouTubers have done in the past, but I will say that there is a lot of internalized phobia or whatever. Like, there's a lot of internalized stuff when it comes to people's rights to feel however they feel. And yeah, part of my story was that I only had crushes on guys who were attracted to guys.
I meant girls.
I never understood that. And I was on dating apps when I was younger. I should not have been, but also I had access to it. And when you have that curiosity, it's so easy to lie about your age. We've all done it. So I remember being on these apps, and y'all know what apps I'm talking about. People just weren't attracted to me on those apps. Now, looking back, it was probably because I was younger as well, but also just in general, I never felt like I fit into the community of gay people. And just for context as well, I knew I was into guys from the age of 12. I was very honest with it about myself, or honest about it to myself. I never had a dilemma in my head about that. That was always very clear for me. But my relationship to being attracted to men didn't make sense to me, because men who were attracted to other men weren't attracted to me. Whether they were adults on dating apps or people my age or whatever, there was just never that connection between me and other guys who were attracted to guys, which was alarming to me because I've never felt like I was unattractive. I didn't necessarily feel like I was attractive at the time, but I didn't think I was unattractive. So I believed in my ability to get a boyfriend or to attract a guy or whatever, but for some reason I just wasn't, and that didn't make sense to me. So watching Caitlyn Jenner's interview and hearing her speak about certain things kind of hit me like a ton of bricks, because I felt like I was hearing my own story being said back to me in a completely different body and with completely different examples. And suddenly things started making sense to me about not feeling like I fit into one category, and why perhaps guys who are attracted to guys weren't attracted to me, because I was never a guy, and I also started understanding certain comments that people had made about me throughout my life, such as, so I mentioned I used the boys' bathrooms. There were times I'd go into the girls' bathrooms as well, and girls didn't mind that. But yet I had like 2 gay friends, and they minded them going into the bathrooms. And I remember asking them, why is that the case? Now, this was back in high school. And they told me that they don't see me as a guy. they just see me as me. And I understood that, but I just it didn't go any further than that for me. But suddenly when I heard Caitlyn Jenner's story and hearing that there are people who can live their whole lives under one understanding. Now, Caitlyn Jenner understood for much longer than her announcement, but there's still this theme of your whole life is one thing, and in actuality, the true person inside you is a whole other person. It was very eye-opening for me. And I remember feeling this sense of relief, but also this innate fear. Now, like I mentioned, this was 2015. In 2015, this was quite a few years, maybe 2 years before gender became this massive topic. Not to say that transgender people didn't exist, they've existed for a long time, but in terms of mainstream society and us talking about these things as a general population, that wasn't a thing yet at that time. So I had a lot of fear. On top of that, because of the fact that it wasn't spoken about as much, I had an image of transgender people being circus freaks. I thought that being a drag queen and being transgender are the same thing, and both were circus freaks. Now I understand that neither are, and I understand that part of my belief of that came from projecting. We as people function off of projection. Almost every interaction we have is a projection of something. If I see something in you that reminds me of myself and it's a trait that I don't like about myself, I will then distance myself from you. And if I see something in you that is a positive trait of myself, then I'll gravitate towards that. And there's so many other ways that we project in our interactions. But ultimately, a lot of my opinion about trans and drag queens had to do with this subconscious lack of desire to explore the topic, because of fear. I didn't know what I would find. I already knew that I was dressing up in certain ways when I was younger. I already knew that I had these interests. So deep down inside, I think you know that if you go any further, you might find something you don't like. But the conscious expression of that is they're freaks. I want nothing to do with that. This is a freak, whatever. So when Caitlyn Jenner came out and said what she said, that was the first time I ever humanized transgender. That was the first time I ever looked at it and thought, oh, wow, like this is something that people really go through. Because also I'd been watching the Kardashians since it started. So I had a lot of familiarity with Bruce, the father figure, and to see Bruce being, she was such a mind-blowing thing, but also brought a lot of context about my own life. So that was the initial realization. My first response was to tell my crush at the time. Now, my initial realization came with two things. It came with fear, like I mentioned, and relief. The fear part, I think, is needless to say. The relief part may seem needless to say, but there were other layers to it that I can explain now, which is that I had a crush on a straight guy, like I mentioned. And when I realized that I was she, it gave me this tiny bit of hope that there's a chance with this guy. Now, it's been years. I don't think that way anymore, and I don't care to think about it like that anymore, but I was a teenager, and as a teenager, a lot of the time you just want validity and to be seen and validated. So I remember thinking, oh my gosh, yeah, like maybe something will work out with this guy, because now we have this understanding that I'm not a he, I'm a she, and there's now room for us to kind of go through that journey. So he was the first person I told. And it was very soon after I watched the video, and he had a great reaction. I still adore this person to the ends of the world in an entirely different way, but he had a different reaction, or a great reaction rather. And then I told my best friend, at the time, she's still my best friend now, but I just have more best friends than one now. I told her, and she had a great reaction as well. And then I told one of my other best friends. Now, I don't want to go into too much detail about this part of the story because I don't want to throw anyone under the bus. But this third best friend was the one person I expected to have the most understanding towards it, because he was going through his own, in terms of sexuality, exploration and understanding, and we confided in each other a lot about his side of the story and his journey. So I thought that telling him would be the most relieving one and would be the most beneficial one for where I was at the time. And I still remember this very vividly. I was outside at the house I lived in at the time, and on the phone with him, and I say to him, hey, hypothetically, how would you feel if I told you that I was transgender? And he said to me, now I'm not going to say the exact words because they were very explicit. He said to me, if you ever cut your off, then I'm never going to talk to you again. From that moment, I shut it down completely. I had not spoken about it until the next chapter of my life since that phone call, because that for me embodied every bit of fear that I had about it. Now, we as human beings fear rejection, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. However, that presents most evidently when it's the people we love. So me telling someone who was so intimately close to me, who I thought would relate to me, and them rejecting me, it shook up my whole foundation. And I felt like I couldn't be that. It couldn't be my reality. So I really shut it down for about 2 years, actually technically 3. And what ended up happening was I moved to America to study film. And while I was there, now anyone who's ever traveled, even if it's for a week, knows that when you travel, there's this sense of rebirth. There's this sense of letting go and truly getting a chance to live your life the way you want to, like, again, even if it's for a week's time. Because there's no one you know, and it's a whole different environment, and the thing that it does to your psychology is so impactful. So I moved to the States, and for the first while, I didn't even think about it. And I think that's the magic of it the whole time, was that I never looked for an answer when it comes to my gender. It always came to me. And that's one of the things that makes me know that I genuinely feel the way that I do, is that it always came back to me. And so I was in the States and living my life, whatever, gay guy, all of that stuff, still not fitting into the, whole gay thing either, whatever that means. Please don't take that as being offensive. I just mean the life of being gay, as in being gay. The definition is a guy who likes guys. I didn't feel that way. So soon after I arrived in America, now a couple of months had passed, I fell in love. Now, whether that love was reciprocated or not is a whole other topic, because there was a lot of mixed messages and confusion and all of the stuff. And that's another topic for another day. I think I'll talk about that whole thing. But anyways, I fall in love, and I realized that my love language, or my expressions of love, were a lot more maternal, loving, nurturing, soft. I felt pretty. I felt like a mom in a weird way. I just wanted to take care of this person. And I don't believe that things necessarily make you a certain gender, but I do believe that there's certain indications of things that can help you explore that on a larger scale. And for me, I realized that I was entirely quote unquote feminine in the way that I expressed myself. I felt very feminine as an individual, and the way I expressed my love for this person was also very feminine. So while I'm sort of falling for this person, the conversations I had a few years prior with my friends about my gender and stuff start resurfacing. And I had never forgotten what had happened 2 years earlier, but I had sort of compartmentalized it in a place that I thought I would never open it up again. And because I now had this safe space with this guy, and I felt like I was becoming more and more myself with him, I told him. And at the time we had a group of friends, there were about 4 of us, and I told them, and I remember telling them, listen, this is how I feel, but don't change the way you treat me. I was still terrified at that time. And I said, don't change the way you treat me. Still call me he, still treat me the way you would have treated me, just know that this is how I feel. Now that was me not feeling like I had space in the world. And this is something a lot of us struggle with, is we don't believe that our full selves have the capacity of being loved and being appreciated and respected, for very basic things, such as how to be addressed. You know what I mean? Like, if you think about it, how to be addressed is not a big deal. It's a very, very simple request, and it's actually very simple to follow through with. But if you don't believe that you deserve to be respected, something that small and simple will seem like the biggest deal in the world. So I was telling them, keep calling me he, whatever, because I was afraid of that rejection I felt with my other friend. On a global scale, because remember, I had come out to 2 people who were my friends before I spoke to this 3rd one who rejected me. So I knew that there were people who would take it and there were people who wouldn't. And there was no differentiating factor between those people because they were all close to me when it happened. So I don't know, I just feel like at that time I had this need to say it, but I also had this fear of sacrificing my safety. So I literally told them, like, just keep it contained. This is just something I'm telling you. That's it. And a few months passed, and slowly I started doing things like painting my nails, which nowadays that's not associated with the gender, but for me it came out of that feeling. And I kept things very low-key, you know. I used to change lyrics of songs to like boy when they'd sing about a girl, and I stopped doing that. Like, I started doing like little things to kind of explore, how do I feel doing the things that I internally feel like I want to do, but not fully embodying them, you know, doing them with a safe space. And eventually what happened was I had this New Year's dinner with my 2 friends who are both from South Africa in America. And I told them about my gender. They were the next people I told after the ones I had told beforehand. And they said to me, why don't you just live your life? And I said, I'm afraid. And they said, what are you afraid of? And I said, I was afraid of being shot. I don't know if I can say that. I was afraid of being taken out, unalived. It was a very deep conversation, but that conversation actually triggered my curiosity, because I had to look around, and by that time it was 2018 and people were living their lives or starting to live their lives. People were starting to show themselves a bit more. And I started realizing that I was being a little bit protective over myself due to my past experiences. And so I started doing more as myself. And one sweet day I fell in love again. And this person was exactly what I needed at that time, because he saw me as who I was from the minute he met me. I had to tell him that I wasn't biologically a she, and he said he would have never known had I not told him, obviously, unless he saw more. But I told him, and he was surprised, and he started questioning me. And at the time I was a bit defensive, but he started questioning things like, I didn't shave my mustache, but I didn't have a massive mustache either. It was just like slight facial hair. And he'd say, why don't you shave your mustache if you claim you're a she? Now, I don't agree with that mentality entirely, and I don't think that he does either. I don't think he meant it that way. But I think he meant it in a way that's like, since you're exploring with things that you're comfortable with, why aren't you taking that the whole way and seeing what you are comfortable with as the person you are? Why are you allowing people to call you he when you're such a beautiful woman? He asked me all these questions that made me start challenging myself and made me start realizing how oppressed I'd made myself. At this point, it had been 4 years at this point, it was 2019. And I hadn't yet fully stepped out and said, this is who I am. I don't care about the consequences. Here I am. And he was the driving force that brought that out in me. And till this day, I will always credit him for the person I am today. Obviously, I would have realized it at some point anyways, but he was a pivotal point for that time in my life, which led to where I am in this present day in that timeline. And he loved me the way that I wanted to be loved. He treated me the way that I wanted to be treated. He made room for me in ways that I wasn't even making room for myself. And eventually he had to leave the country, and I had to pretty much do for myself what he was doing for me. And from there onwards, I just started telling people, hey, I'm she. You're not gonna call me he. I'm she. And I started realizing that it's such a simple concept, like I say, to ask people to respect you. They don't have to agree with you, right? You don't have to agree with who I am. There's a lot of things that I don't agree with that people do. But it's not asking too much to demand being respected. It's not asking too much to say, hey, I am she. And for people who don't understand that, I always use this example. Your name is your name, right? Someone may be from a foreign country or whatever it may be, but that doesn't change the fact that your name is your name. And if you have a nickname that you prefer being called, that's the name you go by. It is never asking too much to correct someone when they address you by the wrong name. So why is it that me saying, call me she, is too much? It's not. I know the story was all over the place. I did want to keep it a bit raw and authentic. And I know that I've left out a lot of little gaps. But I'm hoping that this video reaches somebody who themselves may be asking questions and stuff, and hopefully it provides some sort of a context. I don't know. But I also want to add one last thing. Part of me knowing my gender was also me challenging my gender. I do think that those years were necessary where I wasn't fully being myself, because those were the years where I had the internal dialogue and I questioned things like, is this, excuse me, I'm sick, so I don't care. Is this natural? Is this God's doing? Is this whatever? Like, I asked all of those questions during that period. And had I not done that, I probably would be questioning myself now. So I guess the bigger message is, all in your own time, really spend the time with yourself, taking things slowly, questioning, delving, do whatever you need to do to have that foundation where you know who you are. I only know who I am because I've looked at it from all the angles that exist, and therefore no one can come in the way of that. But yeah, that's me. So if you liked this video and want to see more, I'm not always going to be talking about gender. I think this is probably going to be the last video where I do, unless you want that. Then hit the subscribe button below, like, and follow my social media at Baz Mashabane. I'll put it as a link below. Peace.